Good morning, Davenport. Here again to give you updates and keep you informed and just have a conversation and talk with you guys today. So we've had some guests before. Dr. Katz talked about some of his views on COVID and responses and social distancing. Last week we had Dr. Kobyleski from the schools from his perspective, and today I'm happy to have Ms. Corey Spiegel, who, as I assume everybody mostly knows, is your city administrator. So I work a lot with her, especially lately. But she's the day-to-day person in charge, and so I wanted to take an opportunity and talk with her and let you hear from the person that's quite frankly running the city and answering all the questions and dealing with all the issues that come up. She manages her staff. I'm here to provide some help when needed, but most of the time, quite frankly, it's her and her staff that does the work. So I'm going to have a conversation and just ask her to talk about a few of the things that have been going on, both with the flood and others, and then so you can hear directly from the person who's running the show. So Ms. Spiegel, thanks for taking a few moments to talk. I know we talk a lot, but this is kind of cool, I think, to talk with people in Davenport. So first of all, as you're probably more aware than most people around here, a year ago today, we had, the concern down at Pershing where the HESCO and the Mother Nature exerted her authority. And sometimes, as we do, and I said this kind of this morning, this city's wonderful, and working with the river is one of our greatest assets. But every now and then, just like COVID here, we have to realize who's kind of in charge. It's a pleasure, I think, and a really cool thing to have this river and be able to enjoy it and engage with it. But you're fully aware of what happened. So I guess if you just, from your perspective, talk a little bit about the year and then as we move forward and what Davenport and the citizens can kind of expect and hear from your perspective. So
yeah, a year ago at this time was much different. Our downtown looked different. I remember the day we were in winter coats and winter boots, walking along the HESCO barrier line. We had staff out there reinforcing the line. We'd seen strain in it in a couple of points, even called in a few when Brandon and I were walking the wall. So to wake up to 60 and sunny this morning was a much better year, that's for sure. But what have we learned over the course of the year? So obviously, having been down there that day and getting muddy Mississippi water up to my knees and almost losing my car, we did a lot. We changed a lot. So we had the Corps come in and do the forensic audit, which the council had requested. And I think that was one of the best things we could have done. That group of people came in, really looked at our plan, looked at what happened, gave us some ideas of what we could change to make our flood plan better. And so that was the first step. Over the last few months, we saw the River Drive medians get removed. We roughed up that surface, which allowed us to install the wall. And I think we need to remember, we just came through a major flood this spring. Downtown looks remarkably different. Credit Island's open today, which is great. But those changes made fighting this flood, I think, much easier and made us much more conscious about each of those steps. So you saw us install the double wall. We were both down there when Public Works was installing it. So one of the recommendations from the Corps was to install it in what we call an L-shaped configuration. So we installed both of the bottom rows, but only filled the one. And if we saw a forecast where we needed to, we could easily install the top layer on top of it. So that was one of the improvements. If we see a flood that's coming to 20 in our forecast, that we will do that. We'll set it right away. We have the Army Corps here and inspecting the wall as we install it, which is something new and I think a great process improvement. One of the things you heard, I think everyone heard, is that we didn't communicate enough. So we took that feedback to heart. We built an entire website dedicated with flood resources so that it was really easy to use. We know in government we tend to speak our own language sometimes, and that's not always the easiest to understand. So we really ramped up our social media engagement. We created different ways where you could text us and we could deliver stuff out through our text messaging system. And then again, that beprepareddavenport.com website, where everything was really easy to follow, what stages we're at, what was closed, what to expect, for our building owners, be it residential or commercial, what they should be doing as property owners, lots of really good things there. And then one of the other things we wanted to do, Public Works is a very large department, so ensuring we have employee continuity as we build the wall. So we actually recorded setting up the wall so that future staff could come back and see one before they have to go out and do it. I think those were all really great things we learned, and but for that unfortunate experience last year, I don't know that I could rattle off those six things today. So through that unfortunate experience for all of us, including our small businesses downtown, I think we are better today. And most importantly, tomorrow's a big day. Our flood consultant, the council gave staff direction to proceed with retaining a engineering firm or some group of firms to help us talk about flood protection in the long term for Davenport. Those come in tomorrow, and we will begin the evaluation process with the goal of having a firm chosen this summer, which is what we committed to do earlier this year.
So thank you. The wonderful update. I think if whoever's listening and watching, I've talked to a lot of folks, both in my campaign and being a new mayor. What I've seen and watched. I said it at council before, whether it's this issue or other issues, you and your staff listen and then formulate a plan. And the attitude here, both at the council and for your folks, is, yep, got it, understand, listen, let me get some information, and then go execute it. As we've talked about, as you just said, we just got done dealing with a flood, and I was talking to a few people just this morning, and they're like, you're right, because that's what we do. Right? We do, and then with the anniversary here, as you said, we listened, we learned, and then we talked to people, and again, we're executing, and like you said, tomorrow's kind of a big day, because a lot of people were pushing, both you and I, and others, to, hey, we need someone, we need somebody, we need to have a comprehensive look. I mean, we've already done engage the core, and we do that every day, and I applaud Ms. Gleason, our Public Works Director, for having them right there when it's built, and they pre-position, but everybody want an expert, and the RFPs are due tomorrow. Yep. And then we're having a little committee get together and take a look, and we'll move forward. So thanks for that.
We'll all be reading for many, many hours.
That's right. Yep. So I anticipate some pretty solid, qualified firms or whatever coming in and wanting to help us, and that's a great thing that the citizens, and they'll have part of it. There'll be public input. So, absolutely. All right. So now we have what everyone's experiencing now during COVID-19 and this coronavirus city stuff, whether it's you're an employee or you're a citizen or whatever it is you do, your business, your lifestyle is really pretty different than about 2 months ago. And I know you and your folks have adjusted both with the workforce in our city and some help with for citizens and other things, and work with a lot of different people. And I've witnessed that. And quite frankly, again, the attitude of, okay, terrible thing going on, but we can work through this and get through. So if you could take some moment and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think what we know from inside the city buildings that maybe gets forgotten sometimes is we as your city government are a service organization. And that had to fundamentally change as we began evaluating how to protect our employees, how to protect our community, and how to still deliver the essential services that we're here to provide. So today, April 30th, we still have the majority of our city facilities closed. That'll change a little bit tomorrow, and I'll talk about that a little later. But you can't just walk into City Hall or the police station or Public Works, which was a big decision that you and I and others talked about for many hours, quite frankly, before we chose to close city facilities. But to protect our employees and the public was a big decision. So that will remain that way for at least the next 2 weeks under the governor's guidance of May 15th, and we'll continue to evaluate how to open our facilities up and what that new normal looks like. And we're beginning to define that. We made a lot of organizational changes, especially early in March. I know I flew back from spring break early to come deal with this, but we had more than 40 employees on travel quarantine as they came back from spring break. And our HR team and our department head team worked hand in hand with our union leadership groups to build brand new employment policies, which we couldn't have fathomed needing to do 90 days ago. So our employees really stepped up, especially our union leadership and our department heads, to build some policies about how do we handle what happens when you travel. You know, we basically told people you can't have time off really in the month of April. And that was a big act of trust, I think, between both parties, and I'm really proud of how that came out. Government sometimes is a little slow to innovate, but we allowed telecommuting and working from home in new ways. And I think that's opened up the idea of how we can innovate and how we can provide better service to our community. We're doing some building inspections by iPhone right now, which is really cool. It's not maybe earth-shattering by any means, but for a city government to make that leap, I'm really proud of what they're doing. For our frontline providers, be it transit drivers or our police and fire personnel, making sure they have the appropriate PPE. I think we're in a good shape compared to maybe some places in terms of what we had on hand and our ability to protect our employees. But as you know, it's been a topic of yours, continuing to maintain our PPE protocols going forward is really, really important. We've also had such great support from our local businesses and community members. You've had people making masks for us, or the local businesses who did hand sanitizer, all those kinds of things. That was huge for our public safety and in our frontline providers and public works as well, to continue what they're doing to keep our community safe and served. Now we transition into how do we open back up? We had different plans for some of the different facilities in terms of how we were going to do some public safety measures. Now we're having those conversations with the library of how do you protect both the patrons and the employees. And what about our city facilities will look different, maybe a month, maybe 6 months from now. And those are the conversations we're having. And at the same point, we are your fiduciary agent. So we feel comfortable, as I've shared with you and the council, that we're going to end fiscal 20 in a very comfortable place. There are absolutely impacts, hotel, motel, and the impact to our tourism industry is not to be forgotten. But because we've been diligent and conservative, I don't think we need to make some drastic decisions today, but we're having very, very strategic conversations about what we do with next year. And a lot of that depends on how long these impacts stay. I know I plan on driving to see my parents when that day comes.
Yeah.
So I think road use tax and some of those things where we've seen a dip may come back in a good way.
Right. Thank you. Again, I'm privileged and happy to watch. Some things I've noticed is you and your staff anticipate some things, look forward. You talked about, how we come out of this, and everything that we do in the city kind of has a budget kind of touch, and I've already seen that we're doing that. People have asked, well, what do you think about? We're in a pretty good position because, quite frankly, our staff prior to COVID, not anticipating certainly a pandemic, I don't believe anybody really did that, but anticipating that things do happen, things come up that you don't anticipate, and you need to kind of, the old phrase, rainy day fund, position yourself in your budget so that you can react to things. Your credit, Brandon, who's enjoying Texas now, but his staff, and now Linda and others in your staff, anticipated than the council said over the last couple of years, hey, we need to improve a little fund balance. It wasn't terrible, but we need to make sure we're there. That's going to help us through that, I think. And then you're proactive, looking forward, and anticipating and working with your staff to see, hey, if this is the case, we'll be here. If this is the case, so that the council has some good options on how to deal with some of these funding things that, quite frankly, and everybody's dealing with it, but we're anticipating, and you've already thought about that. You're already working towards that, and I've already heard you many times direct the departments to provide you with an options, and so that you can make recommendations. You've already done that, and so when we come out of this, we have a good plan, and I appreciate those thoughts. So I know we've done a couple other things too. Recently, we've done some rental assistance programs. We've done some fee waverings, and just quickly, if you could just touch on that a little bit.
So when Congress passed the CARES Act, it created some flexibility for us and actually provided the city with a little bit of direct funding in a few areas. So through our HUD money, we have a home program, and traditionally, and you've seen it on the council agendas, we'll go acquire a property, we'll rehab it, and then we'll sell it. Well, through the CARES Act, the provisions changed where we could create a tenant-based rental assistance program. And as of this morning, we've had 1,400 inquiries.
Wow.
So applications go live tomorrow.
And this just went out a day or two ago.
You guys approved it last Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it went that fast. And that tells you there's a drastic need in our community. Those who have been displaced, currently unemployed, there are very good provisions built into the program to ensure that it's really COVID related and that it's to those who need it the most in our community. But to have that level of interest in a matter of days tells us that we had our eye on the right solution for our community. We also received an allocation of just under $1 million in additional CDBG money that we are working on programming for our small businesses. Now, they haven't reduced those restrictions the same way they did with the home money yet. So currently, for the small businesses that have traditionally used our CDBG money, it's not always the easiest to use. It comes with a lot of federal strings, but it is there. We're hoping to see some relaxing of that so that we can begin to deploy it into the business community. But we're really starting to position that as recovery programming. But having that additional $1 million here right in Davenport to help our business community, I think will be great as we move into the recovery stage.
Yep, thank you. And a kind of a thing I see for folks out there, they can know that Davenport cares and understands some situations in a environment where nobody knew what was going to happen here, and you again and your staff and my colleagues here on the council are anticipating some things, saying that it's the right thing to do to help people in certain areas, whether it's our businesses or people that might struggle because they're unemployed. Because I know nationally in the state and here in Scott County, it's a big impact and people are wondering what to do. So we think it's important to assist, but also for people who are wondering about this, and I've had a few people ask, you put some priorities and some parameters in there, so it is related to this issue, and but we think it's important to help our citizens. So appreciate that, and I know I've talked about it. You've talked about it. Many people have. We've developed quite the coalition. Sometimes we're on phone calls with many people at the same time, but I've said before, some of this, even though it's a terrible situation for many people and sad for so many families, some of the compassion and some of the things that you don't think about are coming out of this pandemic, and the working relationship has been pretty good between the region, I think, as I've watched over my time on the council. But now there's an active effort to try and do things in a cohesive way. So if you could talk about all the different entities that are, that we get together with daily, weekly, however you want to.
So I think and you and I have talked about this, our first meeting was March 6th.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about 2 months feeling like about 2 years, this has been that 2 months where there was a group called together to meet with Dr. Katz and the hospital systems and talk through this thing that was headed our way that none of us really understood. And so as we stood that up about 2 weeks later, we started when the EMA and all of the agencies associated with the EMA stood up. We had daily, if not multiple daily phone calls that I've worked into a couple times a week, and now we're into a groove with a weekly call. So the EMA is still at the center of that. We've worked, I think, closer with our hospital systems than ever.
Right.
I mean, I think we have a very strong relationship with Genesis, given their footprint in our community. But the systems have worked together in ways that they maybe haven't before. And as you said, we have great relationship with our city governments, especially in Scott County. But even the nuance of, we don't usually deal with the health department all that much. Well, now we do constantly in the PIO group. And so I think there are connections between layers of staff and organizations that weren't there before, that through this situation have been developed. And I think will make the community better in the long run because those conversations were had. We've talked about challenges in helping some of our nonprofit community who's been helping those who are less fortunate right now, and how do we work together as a government consortium to do it? How do we continue transit service, even though that's very different from maybe what it was a few months ago, and our partnerships with the school. All of those continue. So unfortunately, those conversations came out of problem solving.
Yeah.
But I think those relationships will help us tackle the bigger problems our community faces going forward.
Good, thank you. And then, of course, anytime we get a chance, I know you have, I have, and so many people around here have thanked and so much more. Again, sometimes we take things for granted. Appreciate our healthcare workers, our first responders, our police, our fire, because as we talked about, and I've talked about with some of these folks, there is no plan B. And as you said, some of the staff is at home, some of businesses are closed, and other people are doing other things from other places. These guys are still doing their job like they did before, just in this environment, certainly, watching out for each other and protecting themselves. So thank you from my position and the council's position to you and your folks that are coming to work every day, doing their jobs just now in this environment. So I know you have said it many times, but if you want to say anything else.
And I think we all know someone on the front lines, and not even just us as an employer, right? We have police and fire, and you and I both sit on the medic board. Our frontline responders here, but my mom worked in the hospital for 40 years. My sister's an ER nurse. I worry about my sister constantly.
Yeah.
So for all of our medical professionals, our transport professionals, all of our friends who work in the grocery industry, we see it all, and those frontline jobs that I think we take for granted sometimes, I think we've all learned, I hope, to have a little more humanity around the work that they're doing to keep us supplied and safe right now.
Right. I agree with you. My mother's a retired nurse, and my sister's a nurse in New York.
Yep.
And a lot of people have these experiences, and they just keep doing what they're doing and taking care of people. And unfortunately, some of those folks have either got sick or passed, and I don't know any other bigger service, military or such, our first responders and our healthcare workers and our grocery and all these frontline folks that are saying, I got this, I'm going to take care of you, we're here for you. Yep, so again, thank you appreciate it from the leader of our staff and myself and the council. If you're out there, folks, we thank you so much. So I'll just end. If there's any things you want to relate to our good citizens or our community from your perspective moving forward, I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
So a couple of things. So tomorrow's May 1st, and we're going to try a couple of things tomorrow and hope that our citizens will be good partners in this effort. But we're going to open Red Hawk Golf Course up tomorrow. And all of our golf courses starting tomorrow will be back open to our friends across the river in Illinois with their changes that the governor there has made. I think you've gotten as many as I have about tennis and pickleball. The weather is finally nice. It's spring. We're missing each other. We're missing being outside. We're missing doing things. And we hear you, and we also hear the citizens that want us to stay safe and be smart. So we are going to open the tennis and pickleball courts up tomorrow. They will be heavily signed. We want people to continue to comply with what the state guidance and the federal guidance has been to us about don't touch each other, stay 6 feet apart, don't gather in groups larger than 10. We'll have staff monitoring those, but we understand the need to get outside and be active, and we have some of the best facilities where you can do that. We're asking you to please be safe and be respectful of those guidelines. The last thing you want to do, the last thing I want to do is to have to close them again, but we will if we have to. So please enjoy them responsibly, safely, but get outside, get some fresh air, and follow the guidelines. And lastly, I couldn't be more proud of our staff. This is something none of us could have anticipated a year ago, and we thought a year ago was bad. And we know that disruptive states are hard. We're literally making history right now, and that's really, really uncomfortable. But I couldn't be more proud of the Davenport citizens, everybody in the Quad Cities that's working together, and our staff that is still coming here every day, sometimes at home, and they're virtually coming in to serve our community. I know the unknown is hard, and that's something we struggle with, but I really appreciate you and the council kind of taking that leap of faith as we've changed a lot in the last 60 days, and we'll continue to in the next.
So Ms. Spiegel, I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. I'll just add a couple of pieces to our citizens. As you heard our city administrator talk about, we are listening to you. But the mayor's declaration for Scott County is still in effect till 15th May. We're starting to loosen a little bit. My executive order for city stuff is still in effect, based on the CDC guidelines for 10 or more. So tennis, pickleball, we've all understood we need to do the outside things a little bit, and we're understanding that. But as you heard Ms. Spiegel talk about, and I will be right there saying the same thing, please help us help you by policing yourselves. If you're out on the tennis court, if you're on the bike path, if you're in the pickleball course, if you're out and people start to gather, talk to each other. And just, hey, if you're waiting to get on the court, would you please wait over there? If you're doing this, so we want to open up a little bit, but we understand the safety and social distancing issues, and the CDC still says 10 or more is not okay. So we're going to follow that. We're going to stay with that, and we're going to listen to the governor's briefings. We're going to follow our medical folks' advice, and we need to stick with this a little bit longer. So please help us with that so that we can, when it's time to open up a little bit more, we can do it in a responsible way. Know that your city staff, your day-to-day leader, Ms. Spiegel, myself and the council are balancing and taking into account all these different things. But the most important thing is that everybody stays safe, stays healthy, so we can maneuver to some sort of another normal, however that's going to look like. So, Ms. Spiegel, thanks for your time. I know you got to get back to dealing with things. How many departments do you have? 10, 12, 13, 14 departments that are doing their thing, and you're overseeing management of that day to day now, especially during now, because I haven't been here a day where something doesn't come up or change, and I'll listen and watch, and if I provide some color commentary, so be it, and help through that. But the management is there, and the citizens out there need to know that your city staff is on this. I've said it before, is having an attitude of, yeah, okay, we got this. How do we do with this? How do we maybe look at opening this? How do we deal with the flood? How do we fix your streets? Because those things that we normally do is still happening. If you haven't drove around Davenport a little bit, there's some barricades. There's some street fixing going on, and we're going to continue to get after those things during the pandemic. So we want to do these things. Your council is meeting, your council is talking, and we want to be as best as we can available to you. So again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know you got stuff to do, so I wish you and your staff a continued best as you move forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.